Module 1, we're going to establish the context for the security role here, and we're going to introduce some concepts of security controls and frameworks in this module. The first topic that we're going to talk about is compare and contrast information security roles. And in here, we're going to introduce the concept of the CIA triad and discuss roles and responsibilities in typical information security teams. And this particular topic doesn't align to specific test objectives, but it does cover some terminology, and we need to know this kind of background if you're not working in a security environment, but you want to work in a security environment where there's lots and lots of opportunities nowadays. All right, let's begin. Information security is typically based on the CIA triad. The CIA triad involves confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality implies information should only be known to certain people. Integrity means data is stored and transferred as intended, and that any modification of that is authorized. And finally, availability means that information is accessible to those authorized to view or modify it. There's a fourth element of information security called non-repudiation that doesn't fit into the CIA triad. This means that subjects cannot deny or creating or modifying data. We need to be able to differentiate the goals of providing this confidentiality, integrity, availability, and non-repudiation. And don't look at the property of availability. If it's not there, it can't be seen. The Cybersecurity Framework, this is an overview of cybersecurity functions and typical cybersecurity operations. The NIST Framework, we need to be familiar with the work of NIST, or National Institute of Standards and Technologies. Oftentimes you will see references, and I'll refer to references from NIST, that's nist.gov, to go to their website and find information. In this cybersecurity framework, we have our defense and we have our attacks. We start with detection, which leads to identity, response also to identity, and recovery, which is part of the protect function. Defense works down, attacks work up, and there's activity and there's feedback from each of these under the cybersecurity framework that is used as part of cybersecurity defense. There are several competencies that are regarding information security. We have different risk assessments and testing. We have specifying, sourcing, installing, and configuring secure devices and software. We have access control and user privileges. We have auditing for logs and events. We have incident reporting and response. We have business continuity and disaster recovery, and security training and education programs. There are careers in all of these areas and specializations in all of these areas that Security Plus touches on, but you can go much, much deeper in and obtain certifications in these type of things. Roles and responsibilities. Overall responsibility for security is your Chief Security Officer or your Chief Information Security Officer. Typically, these are board-level individuals. They are working with the CEO and the Chief Financial Officer. They may be in or under the Chief Legal Officer, but they have overall responsibility for security. Under them, they will have various managers leading down to the technical level for an information systems security officer, which could be a job that you do. There are non-technical staff, and then finally, All staff, whether you're in the information security department or not, need to use due care and liability with information security assets. Information security business units, you have the Security Operations Center, you have DevSecOps, which is development, security, and operations all rolled into one. We'll talk in good detail about that. And incident response, which is covered in several topics on its own, where you have the cyber incident response team, where someone Security Plus certified can work, and the computer security incident response team is another component of incident response. Both of these teams work together. There may be only one team, and you'll be either one or the other. And then you'll have the computer emergency response team, or CERT. Once again, another role that you may be working in incident response. You need to be aware of this terminology for the exam. It's easy test questions, true, false, multiple choice type of question. Second topic within Module 1 is compare and contrast security control and framework types. This is an important subject because you need to be able to distinguish between types of security controls. You'll often have to work within different compliance requirements of legislation, regulation, and frameworks that are established either by the business organization or by other businesses that are competitors or cooperatives. The syllabus objectives that we will be covering are 5.1, compare and contrast various types of controls, and 5.2, explain the importance of applicable regulations, standards, or frameworks that impact organizational security posture. When we talk about security control, we first have to talk about how a control category describes how it's implemented. For instance, a document access policy is managerial. Checking that permissions are applied according to the policy is operational, and the file system permissions are technical in nature. As with all classification processes, there is some degree of overlap, but the process itself of classification is designed to help assess capabilities as compared to frameworks and best practices guide. Okay, let's look at the three different categories. Technical are controls implemented in operating systems, software, and security appliances. Operational are controls that depend on a person for implementation, and managerial are controls that give oversight to the system. Three general categories, pretty self-explanatory. Security control functional types. While the category describes the implementation type, a functional type describes what the control is deployed to do. So we have basically the three that are shown here: preventative, detective, and corrective. Preventative physically or logically restricts unauthorized access. It operates before an attack and tries to prevent it. Detective may not prevent or deter access, but it will identify and record any attempted or successful intrusion. And this operates during an attack. And we have finally the corrective control that responds to and fixes an incident and may also prevent its recurrence. And this operates after an attack. And we look at this graphically. We have preventative precedes an event and attempts to block it. Detective operates during an event to identify it. And corrective mitigates following an event. Other functional control types are physical, compensating, and deterrent. And now the other three functional types that were on the bottom of the previous slide are physical, deterrent, and compensating. Where physical, we have controls such as alarms and gateways and locks that deter access to the premises and hardware. Deterrent, which may not physically or logically prevent access, but psychologically deterrence or discourage an attacker from attempting an intrusion. And finally, compensating, which substitutes for a principal control and compensates for that control not existing. We talked about NIST before. Businesses might not be framework oriented, or they might need to use a framework because of a legal or a regulatory environment. We've already looked at the 5 functions of the cybersecurity framework, and risk management is covered later on in the course. But the NIST cybersecurity framework looks like this. I mean, it's an object. The framework itself is an objective statement of current capabilities. It allows measurable progress towards a target capability, and it's verifiable statement that you say that you are operating within the NIST framework. In this example, you state that, and regulatory compliance can be verifying that you are compliance when you do your reporting. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, promulgates a cybersecurity framework of its own. It also has a risk management framework, which is part of the Federal Information Processing Standard, or FIPS. They also give out several different special publications periodically to help and assist within cybersecurity. I want to take some additional time here and go over some general information related to the exam and give you some tips on taking certification exams from my experience in taking them. For Security Plus, you have a maximum of 90 minutes to complete the test, and there are 90 questions. That leads you right into you need to take about a minute a question. A passing score is 750 on a scale of 100 to 900. The recommended experience is a Network Plus and 2 years of IT administrator experience. Now, just as an aside, the Network Plus certification is usually preceded by the A Plus certification in the CompTIA certification world. The types of questions on the test are multiple choice and performance-based. The performance questions, which test the candidate's ability to solve problems in a simulated environment, not a live environment, but an approximation of those. These questions are usually at the beginning of the exam. Use this knowledge to manage your time. If too much time is being taken up with your performance questions, you need to move on to the next type. Just remember, your work is saved if you do move on. And finally, some advice for test takers that I promised. When you're taking these exams, your first answer is usually your best. Now, I'll qualify that with my history from the CISSP certification, in that after I had finished the exam and answered all 250 questions and used about a little over half of my 6 hours that I have for that test, I went back and I reviewed every answer and every question from the very beginning. And I found that there was 7, 8 questions, maybe a couple more, where I had answered the question and apparently misreading a not or a modifier in the question somehow, and I looked at the question and looked at my answer, and my answer was clearly wrong to me. So naturally, I changed it to what I considered to be the right one. So when you're taking these exams, and when you're taking any cert exam, slow down. Take your time, but manage your time. And when I say take your time, I mean, and slow down, I mean read the question. One thing I've heard people do is they will take and circle the knots when they see a question with a knot in it, just to make sure that NOT stands out and that they know that they've referenced that and they haven't missed reading it or passed over it. So just be aware of this kind of stuff that goes on. They are very specific with these. There's only going to be one right answer out of the multiple choice that's there. And just take your time, very carefully read the question and very carefully read all of the answers, because there's only one best answer. I had a professor in college that made it his own personal goal, I'm sure, to make his multiple choice tests the most impossible ones you have. A number of the tricks that he used, they don't use in this type of test, but be careful and read read your questions, read your answers thoroughly before answering, and watch your time. Generally, get a good night's sleep before taking the exam, and don't cram for the exam. Actually, take your time, study for it, study different elements, study textbooks, and know the material, but not cramming for it. You've heard me talk about the amount of time to spend on studying for each part of it in an earlier video. Be aware of that. Don't spend all of your time studying on one aspect or one type of area and not have another area take up a good deal of time. And finally, if you have test anxiety like I do, it may be best not to take those pre-tests or practice exams that everyone's always recommending. For Security Plus, when I took it, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 different practice exams and maybe multiple versions of which. It was the first certification I ever went for. Everything else I did was School of Hard Knocks. And I went in to take the exam, and I was so nervous that I didn't know which way was up. I just went in and took it, and they told me I passed when I was finished with it. So if you have the test anxiety, and you know it if you do, be careful. Maybe not take too many pre-tests, because then when I went in to take my CISSP, I said I wasn't going to take a pre-test or a practice. I was going to go in, take it once, be confident in my ability to take the exam and pass the exam. I walked out of the room after turning my CISSP exam in, felt that I'd passed it, got my result. I did. I was never so happy in my whole entire life, other than the day I got married and the day my daughter was born. And there you go. Have a good time. Keep studying. Good luck.